Hey everyone, it is Alex again, and I am back with another video for Path of Exile. This is going to be my starter for 320, or at least the plan I have for my starter. I do not have a fleshed out starter guide like I had in 319. This is just something I have put together that I'm going to follow, and if you are interested in doing something similar, then you can come watch me stream it on YouTube. I'll actually be streaming it on YouTube this time instead of Twitch, because I realized all my subscribers are here, not on Twitch. So, um, if you're interested in more details, I'll be fleshing them out myself as I play the character. But I'm going to go over what my plan is, and later in the video also I'll go over kind of what I plan to do gameplay-wise as well, as far as my strategies with League Start. So, what is the new build going to be? It is going to be using the new skill, Volcanic Fissure. So just to give you a brief overview of what that actually entails, we've got our new skill gems here. Volcanic Fissure, it's a new slam skill. And it basically works like a combination of like Tectonic Slam and Molten Strike is kind of how I would describe it. You slam, it sends out a little line forward where your mouse button clicked, and then at that location it will explode, releasing at baseline 4 projectiles, which then travel in the air just like Molten Strike. I believe it has a bit bigger of AoE than Molten Strike, however. So we are going to need to make sure that we are scaling both melee damage and projectile damage to take full advantage of this. Looking at the damage numbers, it looks like, to compare it to Tectonic Slam and Consecrated Path, which are both pretty similar, we would need the first AoE melee part to hit, and then at least one projectile to hit the target. And if one projectile hits the target, we're looking at about the same damage as a Tectonic Slam, assuming you're not using any melee-specific scaling. And if you are non-crit, that's actually not too hard to accomplish. And then if we hit any more projectiles that overlap on the target, like with big boss hitboxes, then we're actually going to be getting more base effectiveness of damage than things like Tectonic Slam or Consecrated Path. So it has the potential to be better, and I think you will fairly frequently hit at least one projectile on most targets. So I think this is going to be pretty damn nice as a single target skill, especially if you can get yourself some additional projectiles. Though I think it is unlikely that I will be scaling any more projectiles. If there's an alt quality that gets me more, then that might be something that I go for. At 20 quality, you get one more projectile. That's probably going to be the way to go, but I'm not going to be scaling projectiles too hard. So then the question is, what am I doing with this new skill? So we're just going to go over here to POB again. So we are going totems. We're going to go Earthbreaker totems. Now, Earthbreaker builds on a chieftain have been done, and they've been strength stacking with Brutus Leg Sprinkler. And to be quite frank, I may end up transitioning into that if I play this build for a long time, simply because it can scale into infinity. This is not Brutus Led Sprinkler, but I think this is a bit more conducive to a league start than a Brutus Led Sprinkler build. And this should actually be a rather easy transition into strength stacking if you want to do that, and that will scale harder into the end game. But we're going totems. We're going chieftain totems, and it's going to be those Earthbreaker totems. So, as you can see, we path up here for our Ancestral Bond and all that. We don't actually take Aro Hungui, Moon's Presence. This is something I would take later once I no longer need Tessalio. Tessalio is a really nice luxury when leveling, and I intend to take it for that reason, to make my gearing very easy, because we are rather unique heavy. Once we no longer need that fire res, we've got good phys damage reduction from all our endurance charges, all of that. Probably switch to Moon's Presence because we get the nice defensive bonus from totems and the increased damage, and it makes our totems have more AoE and immune to fire damage. But, so yeah, what's the deal here? Why are we not going Brutus Lead Sprinkler? Well, that's because we're going Facebreaker. So, unarmed. They said that Volcanic Fissure will work with unarmed. So I decided to do that. So Facebreaker, unarmed, more physical damage with unarmed melee attacks. And I want to give a quick disclaimer here about a big assumption I am making with this build. This is the first unarmed attack that has a projectile component. So there's a few unknowns with how it's going to work with things Facebreaker, and actually Hollow Palm as well. If we look at Hollow Palm, you will see right here 40%, adds 14 to 20 attack physical damage to melee skills. And that's kind of the thing that both of them say in their tooltips. Unarmed melee attacks or melee skills. This is worded differently than other effects that apply to melee. So if we look at like an attack that that works here, increased damage with melee weapons, or increased. Let's see, can I get one that just melee skills have increased effect, increased melee damage. So these are all referring to melee damage or two-handed melee weapon damage, melee critical strike multiplier. This is a different wording than melee attacks and melee skills. So I am unsure how this is going to work. My assumption is that it will work, that the projectile effect of Volcanic Fissure will work with the damage from both Facebreaker and Hollow Palm. The reason I am pretty confident in this, in the very least that it is intended that they will work, whether or not they actually coded it properly, and if it's bugged, I don't know. But the reason I think it is intended that it should work is that these are the only two unarmed scaling systems. And they're both have the melee keyword in their description, and as such, if it didn't work with the projectiles from Volcanic Fissure, that would make absolutely no sense, because then it would be completely useless and pointless for it to work with unarmed at all. So, I also think it would be unlikely that even though Hollow Palm says melee skills, Facebreaker says melee attacks, I find it unlikely that like just Hollow Palm will work and not Facebreaker. I think that would also make very little sense. So I am operating under the assumption that that will work. I don't know if there's been confirmation out there yet. I haven't found it. I'm operating under that assumption, so take that with a grain of salt. If Facebreaker does not work, then I will simply go straight into Brutus Leg Sprinkler, go straight into strength stacking as soon as I can, previously just using some rare mace, and just skip the whole Facebreaker idea to begin with. So with that big assumption and disclaimer out of the way, let's get into what I'm doing with the build. Because Facebreaker, we need flat fizz on all our gear. We're going very basic rings. We're not even steel rings here. I'm looking at, this is very, very budget. We're looking at just some resistance rings with a bit of life and flat fizz, and just a little bit of resist. We actually get a shitload of resist from our endurance charges and the Tessalio ascendancy point and nodes in the tree that we need very little resist on our gear. It's very, very nice. Get a bit of fizz damage on our amulet, and then very basic boots with some move speed, life, whatnot. As far as the uniques, obviously we have Facebreaker. We're then running a Lore Weave once we can get it. Lore Weave is the most expensive item in this whole build. So, this is generally one of the last things you get, and it is fairly optional. You can totally, instead of going for like a 5-link Lore Weave, you can probably for the same price get a 6-link rare with just like some life and stuff pretty early on. And that is probably going to be comparable to a 5-link Lore Weave. So, you have options here. Lore Weave is just nice because it gives the max res, which is a good defensive mechanic, and it also gives us that flat fizz to attacks, which when scaled by Facebreaker is pretty good. So this can be traded if for the same price as a 5-link Lore Weave, you can get a 6-link rare. Abyssus is basically mandatory and is insanely good. It's not too expensive at the beginning of a league usually, and we get all that flat fizz to attack. So we don't actually get anything out of the crit multiplier, and that's okay. The 40 to 60 fizz damage to attacks is a ridiculous amount of our damage. The enchant here, you don't need to worry about that. And then the downside of Abyssus, that 45%, 40 to 50% rather, increased physical damage taken. Now you might think, oh, that squishy build, it's going to suck. Well, I have a few counterpoints to that. To begin with, Tessalio, of course. Physical damage from hits taken as fire damage, already a huge mitigating factor to that fizz damage. Point two, we actually have a pretty decent amount of armor. We actually don't run determination. We're getting most of that armor from things like Ironwood, plus 150 armor per summon totem, and I believe there's actually another effect that is giving us armor per summon totem. The last thing that I want to say as being a big part of actually having pretty damn good physical mitigation is 7 endurance charges. We're going to have a lot of endurance charges because we have the 3 base ones. We got 1 from Valico and then 3 more from the tree. These are going to be permanently maintained through Valico as well as Enduring Cry here. We have Enduring Cry with Call to Arms, so we'll always have Enduring Cry going off. The only time we'll have no endurance charges is when a Mortal Call will proc, and while a Mortal Call is procced, we have a huge less physical damage taken multiplier. By the time a Mortal Call runs out, we'll already have max endurance charges again. So, we will have that physical damage mitigation up permanently, and it will more than make up for Abyssus. Alright, I'm then running Belt of the Deceiver just because it's a cheap unique that actually gives us a lot of value. We get resist, we get life, reduced damage from crits is actually a huge defensive mechanic. We get a bit of global fizz damage as well as intimidate, all very, very nice. This is a beautiful belt for the early game. We're then going to be getting ourselves a little bit of that extra reduced damage from crit strikes here in this mastery. Again, that 60% reduced extra damage from crits makes us so much safer. And this little wheel here also is helping with that Immortal Call setup with the guard skills. The last unique I'm using here is Tukohama's Fortress. This is an early game insertion that will get changed eventually, but I'm going with it because it makes our life quite a bit easier and also gives us quite a bit of armor here. That 300 armor per summon totem is actually pretty nice. It's not as good though as getting a shield with its own pretty sizable amount of armor. So, you know, there is better things out there, but this has some nice life, totem damage, plus max totem, bunch of armor per summon totem, and then blood magic. Now, blood magic is more of a downside than an upside, but it does have some upsides. We'll go through those first. The main upside being we don't have to worry about mana anymore. And because we are Chieftain, and because we have, also from Chieftain, we have our totem leeching for us, as well as all the life regen from Valico, we have a lot of recovery that should be pretty much permanently active. All this recovery means that we can just spam cast everything. We have no worries for mana. And that is very nice. Okay, it makes the early game very easy. This is also a very, very dirt cheap unique that no one's going to care about. You should be able to pick this up almost immediately. And that means that you can get your +1 totem without needing a fancy shaper shield. The downside, and it is a very big one, is no mana, which means that we no longer have any auras. I will actually mention real quick, blood magic also does give you 10% more max life, which is very nice. But no mana means no auras, and we would like some auras, things like anger, but more likely things like determination would be really good. We would definitely Defiant Spanner would be nice. There is auras. I forget the auras that give us the most damage. Blood and Sand, of course. Blood and Sand, very big. Herald of Ash, Herald of Purity. All of these are wonderful, and we would run these if we were not running Tukohama's Fortress. So this is an early upgrade that you're going to go for. Once you have the tools to solve the mana problems of the build, which there will be mana problems of the build if you don't put in things to fix it, you can get yourself a Shaper Shield and start adding those auras back into the build. But for my starter setup, I'm running Tukohama's Fortress. I think it's a good insertion into the build. I almost forgot, I just want to go over the jewels real quick. These are just very basic life and double damage, not crit based mods. These 3-stat mod jewels should be like 5, 10 C, day like 2 and 3. We have a few different options that we can go for. We can go for totem damage, attack speed, generic damage, fizz damage, fire damage. Any of those work. So it should be pretty easy to get 3 mod jewels, and eventually with a build you can go for 4 mod as well. Cluster Jewel. So we're running one little medium Cluster Jewel here because we have a few very important mechanics we get out of this Cluster Jewel. The Totem Cluster. We're going for Ancestral Guidance. This gives us effective buffs on our totems, which is very, of our Ancestral Totems, which is very good because the Earthbreaker Totems gives us AoE. we have Ancestral Protector for attack speed, and we have Ancestral War Chief for melee damage. So, all very good. And we know we have Sleepless Sentries, which gives us that nice onslaught. This is just for the nice onslaught, pretty big damage buff, and some move speed, which is good, of course. And then we just slap in another rare here in the small jewel. Looking at that, let's go ahead and get into the tree real quick. I just go for some life here, grab this fizz damage and things, come over here for Unwavering Stance, get a stun immunity, it'll be very nice. Grab the jewel, come down here, get this fire pin wheel. Over here, we grab all these totem things. We obviously want Panopticon. Ironwood makes our totems quite a bit tankier and gives us all that armor. And then we're going over here for the extra speed of our totems. Grab life. We grab the armor and guard skill wheel here. And then we get some endurance charge stacking because we do have 7 endurance charges. This gives us pretty sizable damage, AoE, and armor. And then we get a jewel and our endurance charge. Over here, we're going to grab Call to Arms for that Enduring Cry that I talked about. Come up here from the Jewel Endurance Charge. We're going to grab Resolute Technique. Tongue twisters. Because we are non-crit, simply easier for the starter. We don't have to worry about accuracy, don't have to worry about crit scaling. Things are just easy. Come over here, grab the life and the fire. Damage, life, LA damage, life. Bunch of damage here. Come up here to get our extra totem. Got the totem wheel. We're going to grab the Totem Taunt Mastery. And then I did want to mention one last thing. This mastery right here, right now, is Totem Range, but this mod is actually getting replaced in 320 with the mod that gives you lingering ancestral totem effects, and we will be taking that because it will make our damage uptime quite a bit nicer. This is a level 93 tree. Obviously, if you get more levels, you can go harder with cluster jewels, get a large or something. You could grab more fire masteries, like exposure, things like that. Lots of stuff you can do if you so wish. Alright, so as far as the skills. Right now, my builder skill is Tectonic Slam, but of course this is going to be Volcanic Fissure instead. I'm running Multi-Strike. Now this is something that I'm not totally sure about, and will it be good? The real question is the playstyle good? Obviously the DPS of Multi-Strike is nice for a single target, but will it hurt or clear a lot, or, you know, whatever? I don't know. If Multi-Strike ends up feeling really bad, then we will simply replace it with something like Awakened Added Fire. So, you know, a bit of a damage decrease, but really not much, as you can see. So that'll just simply be, is the playstyle good or not? We'll find out. Awakened Fire Pin, because this is usually very cheap. I just went with the Awakened. It's probably going to be like 50 CE by like day 2 or 3, especially with Awakened Gems now dropping from Maven influenced map bosses. That should mean that Awakened Gems, particularly the cheaper ones, will be very, very plentiful. So Awakened Fire Pin should be super early, cheap to pick up, and that gives us that nice exposure. We then got LA damage with attacks, and then Earthbreaker Totem, of course. We're running on a 5-link right now. Next, we've got our Ancestral Protector setup. We're going Combustion, Calling Strike, multiple totems. You know, this is just a nice support setup. Ancestral Protector gives us the attack speed, which is very, very nice. Get the Combustion for the minus fire res, Calling Strike for Cull, of course, and multiple totems because we are exceeding our totem limit. Right now, we only have 3 totems, 1 from here, 1 base, and 1 from Ancestral Bond. So we're using those 3 all on our Volcanic Fissure count. Go ahead and include that in our full DPS. We're then using 1 Ancestral Protector because this gives us +2 cap. We could have up to 5. Our 4th totem is actually Vol Ancestral War Chief, because Vol Ancestral War Chief gives us +1 maximum number of totems. So this means that we can use our 3 totems, then Vol Ancestral War Chief, and then Ancestral Protector, giving us 5 total totems. And so we're going to run this in our full DPS as well. I'm just running faster attacks on this right now. You could probably put in some more tech here. You could also probably use multiple totems. But then I think things get weird because then both of these start summoning 2 at once. So stuff gets weird. As far some supports that we're going to be using, we got Poacher's Mark. This is our Curse of Choice, I believe, because of the added flat fizz. I was just looking at what this compares to. This, like, huge amount of damage just because right now we don't have a lot of flat fizz, and this helps a good bit with our single target damage, especially early on when we don't have good rares for all of that. Blood Rage because it's free, basically. Bit of attack speed. Lightning Golem, again, more attack speed. And then Enduring Cry, of course, which we're just going to be running on left click. We then have our Immortal Call, cast on damage taken setup that we're going to run. This is for our defenses because we have a lot of endurance charges. Oh, we got a cat joining us here. Blessed video. All right, and I think that covers our support gems. As you can see, we're getting somewhere around 1.4 million DPS, full setup with all the stuff going on. Nice bit of defenses. This is obviously with the Immortal Call active. If we turn that off, you'll see it's a bit more reasonable, but still not too bad. About 6k life with pretty mediocre gear. I think this is looking pretty damn nice for very early on, probably day 2-ish, if you're moving slowly, setup on the gear. So let's say that you want to scale this a bit farther. You know, what are we doing after this very early game setup? Well, the first few things I would do is going to be a Facebreaker Corrupt. You know, you get a high roll Facebreaker with a nice corruption. You've got some options there. Of course, you've got the basic attack speed, you've got life, you've got Curse on Hit. All of these are fine. Go for that if you want. The next big thing, this is probably going to be expensive because I foresee these things to be pretty common, but maybe not expensive on Abyssus. It will be expensive on Crown of Eyes because of the Brutus Lead Sprinkler totem setup. They're running this enchant. The enchant is the Ancestral Protector, grants additional attack speed with its buff. As you can see, just applying this to our build gives us a solid nearly 25% more DPS to the build. So you can see we jump right up to 1.7 million DPS when we get that enchant. So that's a big thing to go for. Hopefully this is not as expensive as it being on the Crown of Eyes setup. Obviously getting a high rolled Lore Weave is good. Belt upgrades, there is the belt that gives you the belts by total DPS. The Magnate, so you can totally go for the Magnate if you want. This is going to give you a bit more DPS over Belt of the Deceiver. And then there's also Relentless Coil if you really want to go super expensive, but Magnate is damn near as good, and you get a bunch of Ellie Res from it as well. Let's see. Obviously, going for four stat jewels will be an upgrade. Flasks, there's definitely some damage flasks. You can go for Lion's Roar if you don't care about the knockback. Cinder Swallow can be decent. Obviously, you can get some flasks that just have attack speed suffixes, things like that. All decent upgrades for the build. The big upgrade for the build that you'll want to go to, that I've already mentioned so far, is getting rid of Tukohama's Fortress, bringing back mana into build, slapping auras, Herald of Ash, Herald of Purity, Blood and Sand, Defiance Banner, Determination if you really want more armor, but I think the endurance charges have you covered for phys damage reduction. All these things, big upgrades once you can handle the mana. In order to handle the mana, you're going to probably want some flat, reduced mana cost of skills, things like that. You know, you've got some skill cost reduction here with this life wheel, but it's not enough. So, you know, you'll have to figure that out. I have not done it myself yet because I plan to stick with the pure life setup for a while. 1.7 million DPS, and that's not including the next upgrade you could go for, which is actually Steel Rings. Go for Steel Rings with Essence Fizz damage. You're going to get a lot more damage out of that as well. Probably looking like 2 million DPS before switching to having auras. With auras and some good rares, you're probably going to be looking somewhere in the range of like 4 million DPS. Still probably not a very expensive build. So I think it's going to be pretty nice as a starter. I hope you guys, you know, give it a shot if this is the kind of gameplay that you're looking forward to. It's going to be a nice playstyle with totems. You get to run around, dodge things. I hope it's going to be good for the League mechanic. I think it will be. Simply because of the playstyle, you can spend your time dodging things very effectively. And yeah, all in all, I think I'm going to enjoy it, and you know, I think it'll be a good build. So moving on to what I plan to do as far as gameplay, you know, what I want to do with my strategy with League Start. I think I'm going to do what I did last season, which is the Chaos Recipe farming, specifically again with Rogue Exiles. This time we have the map mod for 2 Chaos to run additional Rogue Exiles on the map. That's going to make this system quite a bit easier. I do believe it is worth it. I think for 2C you get 2 additional Rogue Exiles. I believe in those 2 additional Rogue Exiles, you get more than 2C in value for the Chaos recipe because of all of the nodes that you're going to take in the Atlas tree. Now, the Atlas tree is getting changed and supposedly very much buffed. So it is possible that this strategy will actually be even stronger this season than it was last season. So I'm hopeful that that's the case. Hopefully they didn't remove, some of the really important mechanics to the Rogue Exile setup. That it can work pretty damn well with that map mod. Also, I intend to probably do Harbingers just like everyone else because of that new fracturing orb. It should be pretty damn lucrative, and I think it'll be good with these totems because of how compact everything is in a Harbinger setup. Want to give a breach a try with the new tons of breaches in your maps and all that, but I'm not sure that this build is going to be particularly effective for breach. I guess we'll find out. I think simply the delay of the orbs and all that kind of stuff might make it kind of iffy on the tons of clear. And lastly, I plan to do the new Forbidden Sanctum, whatever it's called, lead mechanic quite a bit with this build. I think it's going to be very good for it because of the playstyle with totems. I think Volcanic Fissure is actually going to be a very effective single target build. With our damage here, just from looking at Tectonic Slam, like I said, that's the same damage effectiveness as if one of the projectiles from Fissure hits the target. If more than that hits, then we're going to have more than this DPS, quite a bit more in fact. And also, once you get a 6-link, I forgot to mention that, of course, 6-link, you're probably looking at wicked added fire damage, almost certainly. I think it should work very nicely for the Sanctum because it looks like a lot of the content is going to be more single target focused. And I think Volcanic Fissure is meant to be kind of a single target focused slam skill. Very much similar to Molten Strike in that sense. They're going to get a lot of overlap and a lot of extra damage, especially on big hitbox enemies. Unfortunately, it did look like a lot of the bosses were fairly small hitbox in the new lead mechanic. Anyway, I think that just about does it for what I planned for this build. If you want to find out more about how I actually level the build and what changes I make to it along the way, because this is a very rough put together of what I plan to start, I will be streaming this on this YouTube channel, starting tomorrow on Friday, and I hope you guys will join me there. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.